All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be with you all in person or live for this last part. Um, but hopefully you'll be able to watch this part, this video. So I'm going to start us off with talking about case in Tagalog. So we decided to call the three cases by the following names: direct, indirect, and oblique. Um, and so as you can see, the three cases manifest in the pronominal system and also in these particles which precede noun phrases. So for example, ako is direct case, ko is indirect case, and akin is oblique case. One thing to notice also is that the third person plurals, sila and nila, kind of match the case particles that precede proper nouns, so si and ni. Um, Another thing about the pronominal system is that the first person plural has occlusivity distinction. So tayo is we, including the interlocutor, and kame is we, excluding the addressee. There's also this one kind of unique combined pronoun, which is if you have a first person singular indirect acting on a second person singular direct case, so that's kita. So for example, mahal kita is I love you, where kita shows that the indirect case for I is the agent and the second person singular direct being the object. And then so here are kind of the basics of when to use direct and indirect case with verbs. Basically, direct case marks the subject of and nog verbs and also intransitive na verbs. And it marks the object of in and transitive na verbs, where indirect case essentially does the opposite. So we have kumain si Ivy, Ivy ate, where Ivy is marked with direct case, and kumain ang aso, where aso, dog, is marked with direct case for the dog ate. But then within verbs, kinain, ng aso ang halo-halo, the dog ate the halo-halo. And so within the subject is marked with indirect case and the object is marked with direct case. This also works with the same way with proper nouns. So kinain ni Ivy ang halo-halo. Ivy is marked with indirect case, and halo-halo is again marked with direct case. I'll also point out that um, the the halo-halo marked with direct case is translated in this sentence with the. So it sort of looks like definiteness, but it's a little bit different, and I'm going to get into that more. Um, The indirect case can also mark the object of transitive and nog verbs. So kumain ang aso ng halo-halo. The dog ate halo-halo, where halo-halo is marked with nang. And note also that we translated that with a bare noun in English instead of with a definite article. Um, so then I tried to look into how these correspond to things like specificity and anaphora by looking at um, how referents were marked when they were first mentioned and on subsequent message mentions in the two texts we collected, the frog story and the bingo story. Um, so basically, this is kind of a summary of the theory I've kind of made based on that. Um, Basically, ang is always interpreted as specific, as is young. And nung can be either specific or not specific. And in terms of anaphora, So ang is usually how something is referred to after it's just been mentioned. Um, so not on its first mention, but on like its second mention. Whereas Jung seems like it can be used to recall something that's become distant in the discourse. And I'll show some examples of that when we get there. But so looking at the frog story, in narratives, reference seem to be typically introduced with indirect case, unless via the existential my, which takes a bare noun. So we have meron ng bata, tsaka may aso, tas meron ng palaka. So there is a child and a dog, and there's a frog. For direct case, the second mention of those reference took ung. So while the child and the dog were sleeping, the frog escaped. So we got habang natutulog ang bata at ang aso tumakas. And then there was some more, and I cut off because it was a long sentence. Ang palaka. So palaka also got ung. And again, we're translating this as the in the English, but I'm gonna try to show you that it doesn't quite correspond to definiteness, at least how it's defined in English. So ung is specific, but not necessarily definite. So I asked if we could translate kind of specific indefinite this, which is a kind of form we use introducing specific reference in narratives in English. So I went to see this friend of mine, and we got nakita ko ang aking kaibigan. So ang seems okay there, even though it's not definite. It's a first mention referent. But it also seemed like Jung was more common for introducing a new referent that's specific. Looking at the bingo story, the grandmother was introduced with Jung. Yung lola ko dun siya nakatira. My grandmother lives there. And then all the subsequent mentions of the grandmother took ang. Kasi ang lola ko ang bunso, because my grandma is the youngest sibling. Um, so you can also get this with not just not just animate reference, but with specific inanimate things. So, and then they were telling us how to play, things like how to win. Things like how to win was yung mga paano manalo ganon. So that whole noun phrase of things like how to win was introduced with yung. And then going back to the frog story, there had been a few sentences describing the the kid and what the kid was doing, and the dog hadn't been mentioned for a while. And then when the dog was mentioned again for the first time in a while, it got yung. So, tas dito yung aso, hinahabol ng mga bubuyog. And then here the dog is getting chased by the bees. Um, so that's basically it for specificity in anaphora. Um, Curious to know if it agrees or disagrees with other people's intuitions or what they've encountered. Um, so now we're going to see case in nonverbal predication. So typically the subject of nonverbal predication takes direct case, but there's an exception where if you want to intensify the predicate, you mark the predicate with direct case, and then the subject takes indirect case. Um, so like she's so pretty is ang ganda niya, where pretty gets direct case and the subject niya is in indirect case. But kind of the non-intensified version, the predicate doesn't get any marking. So kulay verde ang libro, the book is green, and matangkad si Ivy. Ivy is tall. This also works. So you can also have like a verb phrase marked with ung to kind of make it a relativized noun phrase. Um, um, so for example, masarap ang luto kong adobo. The adobo I cooked is delicious. Um, Although you can put the head noun first, so it looks more like a normal, just unmarked noun phrase. Masarap ang adobo na luto ko apparently means the same thing. Indirect case as genitive. So indirect case can follow a noun phrase introducing a possessor. For example, nakita ulit ng tatay ko. Tatay ko is my father. And maliit na bahay ni Ivy is Ivy's little house. So Ivy is the possessor, and Ivy is marked with indirect case. Indirect case can also sometimes introduce adverbials. We only saw, I think, like one or two examples of this, but a lot of times adverbs precede everything. So you can get, I went there 4 times as apat na veces ako pumunta dyan. But if you want to postpose the adverb, you need to introduce it with nang. Pumunta ako dyan ng apat na beses. But this doesn't seem to be true of all adverbials. Um, some of them didn't get nung. Oh, indirect case for subordinate when clauses. So nung can also mean when in a not in the non-question sense. So when we started, nang nagsimula, which is from the bingo story, and then when we started, it was like I was always winning. Tapos ano nang nagsimula na kami, parang palagi ako nananalo. Um, and then I had a lot of money when I won. Kaya ano ang dami ko ng pera nang nananalo. Na ako. Sorry, I think I had too many nas in there. Nang nanalo na ako. Um, and then when I was little, nang maliit ako. Now, this is the last section of on case. Oblique case usually encodes stimuli, recipients, or kind of other prepositional phrases. Um, so, for example, they showed us the bread. Pinakita nila sa amin ang tinapay. So you've got sa amin. Note that it gets the oblique particle and the oblique pronoun also appears. Um, whereas pronouns typically in direct or indirect case didn't need a particle preceding them. And then we've also got tako tako sa gagamba. I'm afraid of spiders. So here the stimulus of the experience event takot is marked by the oblique. Um, and so you can also kind of do these kind of compound preposition things where you have a preposition marked with oblique case, and then the actual kind of dependent of that preposition um, takes indirect case, which looks like the genitive construction. So I cooked 2 pizzas in 2 hours. Nagluto ako ng dalawang pizza sa loob ng 2 oras. So it's like in the inside of 2 hours. You can also predicate an oblique noun phrase. So this is used for locatives and possessives. The book is Ivy's. You can say kay Ivy ang libro. Um, and for locatives, you get na and then the oblique noun phrase. Nasa bahay ako. I'm at home. And that's it. Maraming salamat.